Here. Here. Here.
Here.
Here.
Here.
Here.
Here.
And we have a quorum. So we only have one item on the agenda today. It's going to be the discussion of a tax increment financing district and approval for, discussion of approval for 801 West Stanton Avenue, a redevelopment district. And at this time, I'm going to ask our Community Development Director, Clara Beck, to introduce Michaela from the bond attorney. Good morning, Clara.
Good morning, Mayor. Good morning, Council. Thank you, first of all, for being here for this special session. We are here this morning because we have kind of an unprecedented opportunity to access funding from the state for a very necessary workforce housing project in town. We're going to hear from Baker Tilly about the financial analysis. The developer is here as well to answer any questions. But I just would urge you to really think about the future of the community as we go into this discussion and just think about the fact that we need this housing, and this is a great way for us to access that. I know that maybe TIF is not something that everybody wants to use, but I think we're going to be seeing requests for it coming forward a lot with the market that we are in currently. So I urge you to just keep an open mind as we discuss, and I will introduce Michaela from Baker Tilly. She's been the one doing our financial analysis. Come on up.
Thanks, Clara, and welcome, Michaela.
Thank you. Good morning, Mayor, members of the council. I am here today, I think if you can hear me, to provide an overview of the financial analysis that we had prepared related to the proposed redevelopment tax increment financing district. I will start with a summary of our financial review, and then from there, a summary of the tax increment financing plan that is the authority for the city to use the tax increment dollars. So starting with the project, the developer is proposing an approximate $11.5 million project, and that is to finance an estimated 60-unit multifamily residential rental development on the proposed site. Prior to establishing a tax increment financing district, there are certain findings that the city needs to make. One is a determination that the project qualifies as a redevelopment tax increment financing district. There was an analysis done by LHB that determined the existing building would be considered substandard. The occupancy test of more than 50% of the area more than 70% of the area being occupied with some type of structure, and that the substandard buildings are reasonably distributed between or within the district. So that report has been prepared and confirming that the district or that the property would qualify for inclusion within a redevelopment district. The second finding is that but for the use of public assistance, would the project proceed as proposed? And that's the financial analysis that I'll be walking through this morning. And then the third is that the increased market value on the site is greater with the use of tax increment financing than no assistance has been provided. The initial value estimates that were used to prepare the tax increment projections for the new development is about $6.3 million. So when we're reviewing the request for financial assistance, we want to understand how two questions. One, is tax increment financing or public assistance necessary for that project to proceed as proposed? And if so, what the level of public assistance is needed to make the project happen? So the information that we had reviewed to assist the city with making these findings included the sources and uses of funds for the project, as well as the operating pro forma that would include the net operating incomes, the operating expenses, and the available income from the project to support the debt repayment, as well as the equity investment on the project. So based on the financial analysis, without financial assistance, we'll talk through what that is including. The project would not be feasible due to the shortage of revenues to support the full investment of the $11.5 million project. This includes both looking at the debt coverage, which I'll walk through, as well as the rate of return projected on the income. So In order for this project to be feasible, there are one or more things that would need to occur. One, a reduction in project costs. Two, additional annual cash flow through tax increment financing to support additional upfront financing. Or three, additional funding sources, which would include the workforce housing grant as a component of this project. So with the annual public assistance, both the pledge of tax increment financing to provide additional cash flow to support additional mortgage, as well as provide leverage for the developer to apply for the workforce housing grant, that's how this project would be financially feasible. So again, going through what the developer has requested, their request to the city is tax increment financing for the maximum 26-year term of a redevelopment district. The project, as I mentioned, is $11.5 million. They are anticipating to finance it through a first mortgage, developer equity, small energy rebates, Fergus Falls HRA grant, the workforce housing grant request, and the tax increment financing. The primary loan is about 42% of the funding sources. Equity is 9%. The grant would be 39%, and TIF is 10%. We would generally see primary debt financing percentages at a level greater than 42%. However, due to the availability of the net operating income from the new housing project, as well as the overall market conditions of interest rates, that is one of the limiting factors for this project. When we're looking at recommending what a reasonable level of public assistance is for a project, there are several policy considerations and guidelines that we look at. One is, what is the total return on investment or the city benefits for this both redevelopment of the existing property and development of the new housing project. We also analyze what the purchase price and other development costs of the project are to understand if there are reasonable ranges that are supported by the project. We look at the public to private investment. Here, the public assistance through tax increment is 10%, which is generally a reasonable level when you're looking at total public to private percentage. We also look at what the extraordinary costs of the project are, and essentially what that means is when we're looking at the project, what are the barriers for that project, for that new development to occur, and those become the extraordinary costs that cannot be supported by the project itself and require the public assistance. We also consider what the absolute financial gap is, and that's again, the ability of the upfront sources to support the total development costs, and market conditions, which is both a function of what the projected rents are of the project, of the new development upon completion, as well as the current lending environment with the higher interest rates and higher construction costs. Of course, the consideration in all of this is what the term of the district collection would be. With the redevelopment district, we do have a maximum term of 26 years, and the developer has represented that the full 26 years is needed, as it provides that additional annual cash flow to support the TIF mortgage that would pay for a portion of the costs up front. I did walk through the sources and uses of funds in the table in the memo. Again, the total development cost is about $11.5 million, which is about $192,000 per unit, and the funding sources being the bank loan, the equity, TIF, and the workforce housing grant, along with small grants. The tax increment revenue projections are based on the incremental value and the taxes that would be generated from the new development. The current value of the property is just under $400,000, and the total taxable value upon completion that was used for the tax increment projections is about $6.3 million. We are assuming this would be reclassified as a residential rental project based on the new development. The tax increment revenue projections are based on the full 26 years and do include an annual market value inflator. Based on those assumptions, assuming 10% of the annual tax increment would be retained by the city with 90% pledged to the developer. The total tax increment that are projected, that's also included within your TIF plan budget, is about $3.1 million. When we factor in the interest component on that, the actual present value of that at 6% is $1.1 million. So essentially, of the 3.1 million of the total gross increment. 90% pledge to the developer is just under 2.8 million. And then the estimated present value of that, assuming a 6% interest rate, is 1.124 million. The remaining about 1.6 million is to finance the interest cost over that 26-year period of what the tax increment district would be. There are generally two ways in which tax increment assistance is provided to projects. It can either be upfront or on a pay-as-you-go basis. With upfront financing, the city would incur a portion of the costs upfront and then would collect the increment over the term of the district to repay that obligation. With pay-as-you-go financing, the developer is responsible for financing 100% of the costs upfront, and then the increments would be pledged to the developer on a semi-annual basis to reimburse for certain TIF-eligible expenses. The structure here is pay-as-you-go, in which it shifts the risk from the city to the developer, and the developer is financing all of the costs and would be reimbursed for a portion of the eligible costs using the future tax increment. When we're looking, when I mentioned the operating pro forma, what we started looking at first is what the operating assumptions are for the project. That includes both the projected revenues, being the rents for the new 60-unit project, as well as the operating expenses. The project as proposed would include studios, 1, 2, and 3-bedroom units, and the estimated rents for those units are $850 per month for studio, $950 to $985 for 1-bedroom units, $1,075 to $1,225 for 2-bedroom units, and $1,300 to $1,350 for the 3-bedroom units. The operating revenues and expenses within the pro forma include 2% annual inflationary increases and 7% vacancy rates. The total operating expenses, the ratio based on the residential rents are about 46% upon stabilization, and then basically the net operating income after the operating expenses is what is available to repay the debt service on the first mortgage. Included also in the financial memo is the projected income and rent levels for the county for pay 24, and the proposed rents for this project, which fall within the 50 to 60% AMI, which is generally consistent with the workforce housing product. So when we dive a little deeper into the financial pro forma and the needs analysis, again, as I said earlier, part of the analysis is to understand, but for the use of tax increment financing, would the project proceed as proposed? What we look at is the projected rate of return and the estimated debt coverage ratio. And looking at this project, we did summarize that there's two pieces of it. Without the tax increment financing as an annual revenue stream, there would not be the cash flow to support that additional 1.1 million of a TIF note that the developer is anticipating. It would need as an upfront source. And then it also, without the tax increment, it would not meet the minimum debt coverage requirements. So that annual tax increment becomes an additional cash flow to support the debt financing, and also to be able to support that additional TIF loan for the project. We also look at what the return analysis of the project is, and this is I would say more subjective. The debt coverage is if you don't meet your minimum debt coverage of 1.1 or 1.2, you're limited in the amount of financing that the project can receive. The rate of return equity investment is if the threshold's too low, the equity investors are not going to invest in this project. So between the two of those pieces, if we looked at this project purely from a private financing of the first mortgage and the equity, you'll see approximately 50% of the project would not be financed, and that's including both the workforce housing grant and the tax increment financing. By pledging the tax increment financing from the new district, It does two things. One, it provides that additional cash flow to support a TIF mortgage to pay for a portion of the costs up front. And two, it provides that public support for the developer to apply for the workforce housing grant, which is a key component of the financing sources for this project. So in conclusion, without assistance, as I just indicated, when we're looking at both the metrics of this project, the rate of return and the debt financing, as well as the need for the tax increment to support the workforce housing grant. Without tax increment financing, there would not be the public support, and there would not be enough upfront financing to support the $11.5 million project. So that concludes my financial review of the project. The tax increment financing plan that you have before you, that is a document that includes upon approval, that provides the city with the statutory authority to use tax increment financing. It is not an obligation of the tax increment dollars. There is a tax increment agreement that would be between the city and the developer that actually includes the terms of the public assistance. And again, that would be in the form of a pay-as-you-go note in which the developer would finance the costs up front and would be pledged the semi-annual tax increments once the project is complete. Assuming that there's approval of the TIF plan, and then that would be the next step, would be the TIF agreement. The TIF plan itself includes, again, the statutory requirements that it does qualify as a redevelopment district. It identifies the area for which the tax increment district would be, the boundaries of the tax increment district, and that would be where the tax increment dollars are generated. It provides a budget of the total estimated project costs and sources of revenue. The budget is $3.1 million, and again, that's to finance on a present value basis $1.1 million, $1.124 million of TIF eligible expenses, with 10% for admin, and then the remaining amount to finance interest at 6% on the developer pays-you-go note. The estimated project costs and the total revenues have to be equal, and that's where the $3.1 million comes in play. And I think those are the primary target points on the tax increment financing plan itself. So with that, I would stand for questions.
Can you just touch briefly on the changes to the draft TIF plan regarding the use of the word demolition?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, as I mentioned, when a redevelopment district is established, it's based on the current condition of the project, and there are certain, certain TIF eligible expenses that can be financed from a redevelopment tax increment district. Those include all the costs of correcting the conditions that allow designation of the redevelopment district. This project is because it's done and there's multiple sources of funds, and it's going to be done in multiple phases. In order to qualify as a redevelopment district, again, we had to have the substandard building. As part of this redevelopment district, that building would be demolished, and then to allow for subsequent construction of the new workforce housing project. We understand that there are additional funds that the city has received that would finance the initial acquisition and demolition costs. So the TIF plan, I modified it before the meeting this morning to remove the reference that tax increment would be financing any demolition costs, but instead it would be kind of the next phase of once the building is demoed, there would be additional redevelopment costs that could be eligible for reimbursement, and that would include additional site grading, site improvements, acquisition, utilities, and other related project expenses.
Thanks, Michaela. Thanks, Clara. So at this point, we're going to open up the public hearing, but before we do so, if there's any questions of the council at this point for Michaela or for the developer who's with us here, we can ask those then, and then we'll open it up to the public, then we'll bring it back for consideration of a resolution establishing that TIF. So, Councilmember Kramer.
How many years is the payoff on the debt?
The current for the developer, right now the developer finance, well, the pay-as-you-go note for the tax increment district is 26 years.
How about the payoff? I should have clarified a little better. Payoff for the loan.
Payoff, is it a 30-year term? Yeah, it's a 30-year term.
Other questions for Michaela? Anthony?
What's the city's cost to put infrastructure to the site, and how are we funding that? Obviously there is. I'm assuming that we're going to need larger capacity. At the moment, it's one building. Obviously, we move to 60 units. That's going to be more sewer, more water. What's the plan?
That on the developer on their private site?
There are mains, Brian can correct me if I'm wrong, but there's mains that run, basically through the road to the edge of the property. The developer will be responsible for getting the utilities from the main or from where it ceases the public portion of the line to the building where they want that. So, but the availability of water and sewer is in the area, so it's not a major undertaking. Brian, is there anything different that you'd like to say?
Based on what I know, no, that's correct.
Other questions? Councilman
What,
Brenner?
what would be your payment for those 30 years a month to cover that? I'm sure you got that someplace.
The TIF or the first mortgage?
For the mortgage.
You know what, I didn't print out that page.
I'm pulling it up.
I have it on my.
I can pull it up. It looks like the monthly payment's about 29,000. That's,
I'll confirm that in just a second. Computer's not that fast.
Other questions for Michaela or the developers? Well, before we open up to the public?
I think I've just. I think my problem as much as anything is like I get heartburn over 26 years from the TIF perspective, but I also was looking at like this project is going to cost obviously $11.5 million to build, and if you divide that by kind of 60 units, that's a couple of $100,000 a unit. There's a grant for $4.5 million from the state / the little bits. That brings it down to $116,000 a unit. And then if you look at 26 years and $3 million off that, you're kind of getting down to a unit cost of $60,000 to $70,000. With the rents that are being charged, there's other places in town that obviously pay a greater number than that $70,000 or $120,000 per unit, and still make it pay. And I also have a hard time understanding how we're going to put $11.5 million into building something, and then it's immediately discounted to be only worth $6 million. So it seems why I know we're getting the money from the state, but if we weren't getting the money from the state, why would you even do this? Because it's not a good return as such. But it is a good return because I think it's going to be worth more than $6 million. And it's we have obviously a job to balance everything. We need to obviously improve infrastructure, but I don't know how we're going to get revenues. 26 years, it's a long time for this project to pay back, and I just have a hard time understanding the economics of like why you would even do it if you need 26 years to get it to pay back.
Thanks, Anthony. I guess I'll just maybe comment from my perspective. First of all, that's the reason that the workforce housing program was developed, is because these projects in greater Minnesota don't work, and there's a great need for housing, as we hear from our employers. There's a need for housing for our employers to grow to locate in rural communities. That's why this program was specifically designed. We're able to provide and deliver on that desperately needed housing with tax increment financing that we don't currently have. I just want everyone to make sure we understand. We don't currently have this revenue, and we won't have it if we don't invest this project. Right? We are capturing what we don't have to deliver workforce housing that our employers tell us is desperately needed. We're also cleaning up a blighted site and leveraging this project to develop another site next to it. So I understand the finances, probably don't make sense if the state's not involved. That's why the state's involved. The other thing is we're accessing these funds at a time when they exist. And we could wish interest rates were lower, and we could wish construction costs were lower. And while we're wishing, other communities are building workforce housing. And I appreciate the concerns, but I just want to make sure everyone understands that this property currently generates $5,000 in taxes to the city. This property will continue to generate $5,000 in tax revenue for the community while we build 60 units of desperately needed workforce housing, leveraging state funds that are available right now, not knowing if those will be available in the future. So, just one clarification too: the $3 million to bring it down, the value of that up front to build the units is 1.2. So, I mean, just not to split hairs, but just on the upfront construction costs, just to be clear on that. It's finance. We can do a pay-as-you-go, or we can do an upfront TIF, and this proposal before us is a pay-as-you-go. So those are my comments. We're going to open up to the public, unless the council has any other questions for either the developer or the... Skip, would you like to address the council?
I won't go into, Michaela did a great job of explaining the project, so I won't go into any of those details, and we did that here recently. You really want to get down to the nuts and bolts of TIF, right? But to answer your question, our total debt service is $36,286 a month, including the TIF, if that was to be approved. And Michaela's number of $29,000 and change is the first mortgage. The funding that is available right now, which I had mentioned to you last time, is a little bit of a once in a lifetime right now, at least the way this program has existed. It's only been around for about 8 years, and normally it's been funded $2 million to $4 million a year. And as I mentioned before, this year there's $39 million. So you're not the only community out there looking to build workforce housing. There are lots of communities, and there's lots of communities that are submitting 2 applications. So it's going to be a very competitive process. We're doing the best job we can with the way this site and what we're doing to get the most points to try to get a project funded here. But there's no guarantee that even if you approve the TIF today, we're going to get it. But I can tell you, Monday, just this week, I was in Alexandria, and they approved a 26-year TIF for our second project. They approved a 26-year TIF about 4 years ago when we did our first project there. Andrew was in Brainerd that same night. They had a 26-year redevelopment TIF as well. That TIF was approved about a year ago. We've been working on that project for a couple of years. They were approving some variances and conditional use things so we could maximize points for that project as well. So I can just tell you, just Monday this week, 2 projects, other projects we're working on have 26-year TIFs on them. It's up to you to decide whether you want to move forward on this project or not. We have 7 applications we're submitting. Yours is one of them. We have plenty of work to do, but it's really up to you guys. I think the thing that people don't always look at is, all right, we're giving up the taxes that this is going to generate for whatever period of time is approved. But there's more people that are moving into the community. There's kids that are going to the school that the school is getting reimbursed per pupil units. There's people buying groceries. There is benefit to the community, and not to mention the employers in and of themselves. we've done 2 TIFs and tax abatements in War Road for 24 years on 2 projects. Another application, I'm sorry, I need some water. Another application we're submitting here is a project in Roseau that the city EDA is the owner. We are just the developer helping them. That's the second one. Both of those have been 24-year TIF and tax abatements. Michaela is familiar with the Roseau project. She was involved with that community as well. So that's what you're competing with. There's other communities that are willing to do it. And so it's really up to you whether you want workforce housing built or not. And I'm happy to answer any questions and get a drink of water.
Thanks. Thanks, Skip.
Yeah.
Maybe, okay, yeah, go ahead.
You mentioned Alexandria. I think we've got to look at too, what you say, I'm not doubting that it's true. But you have to also look at what is going on in that city for a 26-year TIF. Alexandria is getting other businesses coming in. We haven't right now that are larger. And so I can understand that. I just think that needs to be brought up too.
That may be the case, but if you don't have housing, you're not going to get other businesses coming in. I mean, it's simple.
And it kind of goes with the chicken or the egg. It kind of seems like we look at that debate.
Right.
Which
No,
is how you look at that.
I know. I can give you examples in Roseau and War Road and Thief River Falls where you have major employers. There's no housing. They hire temporary employees that are very expensive. They chew up all their hotel rooms. Thief River Falls can't even hold hockey tournaments because the Angles or the Little Ralph Arena, they can't use it, and because there's no place for people to stay. So companies can grow without housing, but there's other things that we see with employers and communities that we work with in Northwest Minnesota.
And what's kind of nice about that is that company's already there with a major need. So, basically that industry like DigiKey or what have you is already there. And I can understand building housing and going for that. I wish it'd be interesting if there was somebody from here from Otter Tail Power or Lake Region to see what their numbers are for their people who aren't being served home-wise.
Yeah, I'll just jump in there. Lake Region did submit a letter of support for the workforce housing project when it was submitted to the state as part of this.
And so did Vector Windows.
So did Vector Windows, so did Pioneer Care, I believe. There's a number of businesses, but I think
thank you so much.
I've been in this game a while, and I've talked to a lot of businesses in town. And if we think we're going to attract business to this town without housing, I think we're kidding ourselves. And I think that's not even taking into account the businesses that are currently in our community that need to grow. And they will say that they need housing to attract employers. I mean, that's what we hear from the people who actually are providing jobs in the community. Other questions for Skip before we open the public hearing? Yes.
Well,
Tom.
I'll just make the general comment. When we've got the largest employers in town, in full support of this project, I don't necessarily believe that we as council members are equipped to second guess their needs. And the whole anti-TIF sentiment, it just wears on me. It feels like we're beating a dead horse. As Ben so eloquently put, we wouldn't be getting this tax money if we didn't do this project. So it's either we continue to get $5,000, in tax money, until it just kind of rots away to nothing and then we have to pay to clean it up, or we get a nice 60-unit housing that the employers in town have asked us to build. That's really what it boils down to. Is I just can't, I don't have a very good poker face, but I can't wrap my mind around the fact that we would want to just give this project away to another community possibly, when our employers are asking us for it. So I appreciate what the developer's doing. I appreciate the work of Baker Tilly and the staff that's helped to make this project go through, and I support it 100%.
Thank you. And there's one little piece that I just thought of too with your land. Right now, you at your last council meeting, approved buying the land for $950,000, right? You have a grant for $650,000. You're short $300,000, which is what the next item on the agenda is about selling it to us for $300,000. That makes you whole. Without us moving forward with this project, you're not whole, and the city has to come up with $300,000 to complete that purchase agreement. So there's a little benefit in that you're coming out clean on the land transaction. You facilitated getting a blighted area cleaned up and creating housing. I think that's a plus too.
And just a question on, as long as you mentioned that, Skip, and we'll get to that purchase agreement, but the site, it's a buildable site. We had originally talked that there's potential for more than one site, one building, but with your experience, your expertise, there's one building site on that.
With those, I mean, the site is large, but there's a huge bank. And the topography just doesn't lend itself to put multiple properties on there. There's a little excess room to, I can't remember what direction that is, but to one side. But you would almost need to build a city street to serve it, because now it's a private road that would come in there through the apartment building, and it wouldn't be of any size. It's small.
I just want to make sure
Yeah,
that the public knows that the intention, I don't think from the developers, and correct me if I'm wrong, is to acquire the property, build one unit, and then sell excess land for a profit on that site.
No.
Okay, just want to make that clear.
You could put a deed restriction on it. I don't care.
Sure, I just want to make it clear. I've heard that question from
Okay.
the public, and I just want to make it clear that we've talked through that.
Yep.
Originally, we're hoping to put more than one building on that site, but again, with your expertise, that was determined not to be feasible. So,
Yeah, I would say usually a project of this size, you could fit on 3.5 to 4 acres, depending on roads, utilities, and topography. But this one is just a bit unique.
yeah, thanks. Well, yeah.
I think this question, it did come up last Monday when I asked you who contacted you about this maybe being available, and you said it was Mayor Ben.
Me.
And the question that I have for you, Mayor, is that why was there others not contacted? Why don't we have other developers interested in this? It seems like one was singled out. You know, that's how business makes money, is you have people bidding for something or giving their offers or their bids for the best of the city. That's just a question that I
Yeah,
have
sure.
for
So
you.
we actually heard from local developers as recently as yesterday that they just don't see how to make this project work. They don't have the experience to pull together the complex financing. We've watched that on other sites in town that the city council has offered. First time I spoke to Skip, I said my intention would be that someone with his experience, this can be a blueprint for other developers in Fergus to watch what's been done. It's been successful in Brainerd, it's been successful in Alexander, it's been successful in Perham and Roseland and Thief River. So to be very clear, the day that we received the housing funds from deed, I've reached out to D.W. Jones, who was provided. The name was provided from Minnesota Workforce Housing as a developer who had successfully completed that project in the past and was reputable. There's a couple other names too, but I recognize the name. I know Michael from the HRA had spoke very highly of Skip. I've talked to other mayors in the state. So he's a reputable, respected, experienced developer who I knew on a short time frame could get a project done, so I reached out to him. And certainly not going to apologize for that.
I'm not asking you to apologize. I'm just asking, why it wasn't put out there for others at that same time.
Yeah, I think, like I said, we were clear that any developer, we spoke to local developers as recently as yesterday about these types of projects. There's a project on the other end of the river down here that for 4 years after the city did approve TIF financing, just didn't come together. So on a short time frame, on a complex project, we're hoping that D.W. Jones can come in and lay a blueprint for local developers. There's lots of housing that needs to be built in this city and in this county. So, I mean, the more the merrier. We have a site right across the railroad tracks. If there's local developers that are out there that want to build a housing project in Fergus Falls, we're all in. And we've talked to them. We talk to them every day. We talked to local developers yesterday. So.
Right, and talking to him yesterday is way too late for this project.
We've been talking to them for the past 3 or 4 years. Other questions of the developer or Michaela before we open up for the public hearing to continue, and then we'll bring it back to the council to consider a resolution creating that TIF zone.
Your Honor.
Yes.
You know, I've been getting this email, you know, lately from the kind of the ringleader of the anti-project crowd, and you know, asking about what is the benefit to the developer. I'm sure that's going to be brought up here shortly, so I can give you time to start working on that answer. You know, and then also with, you know, maybe I'm just reading too deep into it, but I feel like implications are being made that there's something improper going on here, and I really don't appreciate that. Any developer could have approached that property owner and said, hey, I'd like to build a development on your property. There's nothing wrong with that, you know? And as far as the benefit to the developer, I mean, the developer is the one that's taking all the risk. I mean, the developer is putting their neck on the line for this project. I mean, it's an $11.5 million project, and if something goes wrong, the developer's on the hook. And so I just wanted, you know, if there are any allegations of impropriety, again, I hope I'm misreading things, but why don't you just go ahead and make those, and let's be done with it. Let's not, you know, spread whispers and rumors and make implications and you know, veiled accusations. Let's get it out there. Otherwise, let's move on.
And just to be clear, just to close the book on this one, is it unique for a community to contact you to ask about doing a development in a community?
No. Of the 7 applications, all of them contacted us.
Thanks, Skip.
Every single one of them.
Thanks, Skip.
I-
We're gonna open up
but
the
we
public-
don't ever compete on an RFP for this kind of housing. I mean, I have communities, I have employers, and sometimes it's an employer that is driving that push, especially up in Northwest Minnesota. But the communities contact us.
Thanks, Skip. Sure, we'll maybe have some more questions, but right now we're going to continue the public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak to the creation of a TIF district at 801 West Stanton, please step to the lectern and state your name.
Lori Mullen, 2840 Lakewood
Public hearing is
Drive.
now open. Go ahead, Mrs. Mullen.
Just a question for Skip. How does this compare to the War Road project? Looked at the Roseau County site, and they had just posted that that project was valued at 6.1 million. And I had talked with someone there, and they said that they had, the TIF was somewhat less than what you're looking for in Fergus here. I don't know if that's true or not.
Do you want me to just stand? Can I just say it? Or?
Yeah, maybe just the mic.
So as I said earlier, in Roseau and War Road, the financing was done a bit different. It wasn't a redevelopment district. So Brainerd was a redevelopment district, and so is this one because of the existing blight that is on the property. So you can go up to 26 years, and be non-income restricted. So it's all market rate housing. So on War Road, we did a 9-year tax increment financing district and in Roseau, which is the maximum amount you can do without income restrictions. And then we did a tax abatement with the school, the county, and the city for an additional 15 years. So they are 24 years. It gets you, it gets you the same results, but it is 2 years shorter. The other thing that, you know, in Roseau, we have employers that are contributing. We have cities donating the land. So we have other things that are generating dollars that we can match the state money with. Here, the HRA has donated some money, and we have the TIF. That's the only things we can use to match. So it's very similar. It's just financially, it's slightly different.
Is the TIF the only thing that can be used as a match?
The TIF, no. Donated land can be used as a match. Employer contributions can be as a match. In Brainerd, they've waived SAC and WAC fees of $247,000. That can be used as a match. It can be in kind. it basically is local dollars is what can be matched. So like in our project here, the $1 million that of equity that we're gonna cash that we'll put into the project can't be matched. That is just our equity. If an HRA or an EDA owned the property and they were putting cash into it, that could be counted as match.
So why is our project down here so much more than the one that was in Warroad?
It's not. Well, one minor difference in cost between War Road and here is it was a smaller award from the state. It was back when interest rates were much better. We got a 10-year fixed rate loan for 4% interest instead of 6% interest. And so we were able to do that without building prevailing wage. Here, we're over $500,000. We have to build prevailing wage. That adds over $1 million worth of cost right there.
So that was 6.1 million in Warroad?
No, War Road is around 10 million. And Rosa was a smaller project too. That was the one that is existing is only a 37-unit building. War Road is a 65, so similar.
So the Warroad one was I think what I wrote down was a 15-year, $617,000 TIF on that one.
So that has a 9-year TIF, and I don't remember the amounts, and a 15-year tax abatement. So there's two pieces. And really there's 4 pieces because the school and the county also agreed to tax abate as well. So there's 4 pieces that comprise the total amount of dollars that we can use to pay for bricks and sticks in the building.
I guess my confusion was with the county coming in saying it was 6.1 on the web page, and then on our report saying it was going to be 6.3, putting 11.2 million in and having a 6.3 return. So I think it was just confusing.
The other thing is each county values properties differently. They're not the same. And a 10 million property here could be valued $1 million more than in Roseau. You know, when Michaela puts those numbers, she has to use current tax rates and contacts the assessor to have them give an estimated value upon completion because it's not a standard.
So our land value could be used more towards, for the 960,000 could have been used as a match versus the 300,000.
No, because it won't. What we have to do when you're donating land is you need to have an appraisal. It could be a county appraised value, but if you're paying $950,000 and it's worth $300,000, the state will only match $300,000. And we have a project up in Silver Bay. They're buying some land for $150,000. They're donating it to the project. It appraised for around $75,000. Even though they're paying all this for it, they can only count what it's valued at. They're paying more than it's worth. And because of the cleanup that needs to be done there, the costs are higher. And for us and for the state, they're looking at what is the dirt worth. Does that make sense?
Thanks, Skip.
Yep.
Others wishing to speak to the council?
Hi, Donnie Olson, Fergus Falls. I just wanted to see if, I did some research just trying to look up scholarly articles and trying to see if there's anything really about workforce housing and economic growth, and there wasn't a lot. The only article when I searched without the words workforce housing, when I found rural economic growth, didn't even mention the word housing. But there was some articles that talked, there's definitely a need. One of them, one of the articles I read, there was a direct quote that the participants in the town hall meetings, as well as the economic developers who responded to the survey, were not convinced that housing is a key to economic development. There's so many other things like education and other things that can be done, but I don't want to waste my time on that. But I will say one of the quotes from one of the people that were leading the project said, "We're under no illusion that offering some nice houses or whatever will land us a major employer, but we have to begin somewhere." And I think that's probably maybe where we are. And onto the finances, the Baker Tilly report didn't really get into the revenues and expenses. They kind of talked about 60 units, and it was about an average price of 1,000 and 7% vacancy. And then all of a sudden, we're talking about cash flow to debt ratios. And based on what I got with 46% operating expense, I'm looking at they should have an EBITDA of close to 360,000, give or take, which is going to be a lot of that payment, a lot of those interest, I'm assuming. But at the same time, they were given an asset that's worth at least $6 million, maybe $8 million, and they got like $1 million in capital. So I really question the need that it needs to be a 26-year term. I don't know if there's an opportunity to be less, because ultimately what is going to drive growth is, businesses have to want to come here. And to do that is, you got to have, you got to be competitive. We're 20 some miles away from North Dakota. There's so many other things with like taxes and, like I said, education. We don't have it. We have a nice community college, but we don't have a big one. We've got Greater Fergus Falls that are doing some things. But you got to be economically competitive. And so to just the 26 years, you're bringing in, I don't know how many people live in a 60-unit deal, but that's that many more interactions with police, whatever it is, school, all those things, and you're not paying, and school tax is different than Fergus taxes, but whatever, those taxes, 20 years from now, if they're not getting paid, that could be an issue. So I understand the need. I run a business just down the road, so, I'm happy to see it, but I don't think 26 years, I think it's a long pill to swallow. So thank you.
Thanks, Don. Anyone else wishing to?
Morning, everybody. Can you hear me? Good. Lance Anderson, Executive Director of Greater Fergus Falls. I am strongly in favor for this. I meet with business owners every single day of my working life here. And what do I hear for the most thing that they need? It's housing. They need employees. They need a place to stay. And here we are, we're arguing over 26 years, 14 years. To me, the years don't matter. They really don't. You have to do something here, right? Let's not go backwards. Let's go forwards, please, right? I mean, we have an experienced contractor right here that has done this in multiple places, right? Many multiple places, and it's been successful there. And TIF we need to use TIF. We absolutely do, and in the most extreme ways. The time is now. If we're not going forward, baby, we're going back, okay? So that's my position in all the conversations that I've had with so many in the community here. So that's my point. Thank you.
Thanks, Lance.
Jeff Ackerson with Vector Windows, and I know I spoke at the last public hearing as well too, but as I hear the chicken or the egg comment, I hear, do our employers need workforce housing? I hear about the 26 years, I hear about all that. Again, this is tax increment financing. So if we don't do this, again, keep collecting your $5,000 a year and watch the businesses leave town, or as they need to expand, go to Alexandria, go to Brainerd, go to those areas and bring their tax base along with it. I sit on a couple boards here in town as well too of other businesses, and I know they couldn't be here today. If we don't think we need workforce housing, we have CEOs going to Workforce Hope, trying to bring people over from other countries to come here because we have a lack of workforce. They can't bring those into this community because they need housing first. They're bringing 1 out of 8 employees that we need here today. And if we're going to say that we don't need housing today, or it's a chicken or the egg, and we don't want to invest until we have a large company here that wants to grow, I'm sorry, large companies, and I've done site selection for other companies I've worked for, You don't pick a community that does not have workforce housing to allow them to grow. I don't understand how this is so hard or so difficult, or the questions that I hear coming out of some of the council members here. And I respect the job you guys have. I respect what you have to do to watch for tax base here today. You are not giving away current tax base, but you will give away current tax base if you don't create a TIF district and help get workforce housing here. So again, I am very much in support of this. I don't understand how it's even a question, but those are my comments for this morning.
Thanks, Jeff. Anyone else before we wrap up? Yeah, please, Debbie.
Good morning, Debbie Smith from Fergus Falls, Minnesota. I have just kind of a question. I was listening to what was being said about what the rent would be. I understand that employers are looking for employees, needing some specific skills. But I'm also very well aware that, for example, somebody entering the workforce, let's say they go to Fleet Farm. They start out at $12 an hour. You'll also find out that oftentimes they are not allowed a full-time job. Many people have left the jobs because when they started, they found out the company was struggling and their hours were cut. I know one woman who works 3 part-time jobs just trying to make ends meet. I am wondering, yeah, I understand employers are struggling too. The economy is difficult at this point. I'm just wondering, where are these jobs that somebody is getting paid? What the median income is? What, less than 49,000? I don't understand how they're going to afford the rents that were just quoted for the facility. Just a question.
Thank you, Debbie. Skip, did you want to?
In our narratives, we actually do go through that math a little bit. And in Fergus Falls, a single wage earner, you make $16.35 per hour to afford a studio, $8.27 for a 1-bedroom, $22.21 for a 2-bedroom, and $25 for a 3-bedroom. And 2 family earners obviously would be half of that. But yeah, I mean, even with the affordable rents that we have, they're up there. They're not low income rents. They are market rents. But we've had a market study completed by Maxfield Research. They supported that those rents that we're proposing would be absorbed in the community, and we would be able to fill the building and occupy it. So,
Thanks, Skip. We'll bring it back to the council here. Go ahead.
One quick comment.
Let's leave it to the public, and we'll close this part up, and we'll bring it back to the council.
I'll do my best to remember it.
We're going to close the public hearing here shortly. If anyone else wishing to speak, okay.
Bob Noah, Fergus Falls. I guess first thing I want to say is that it's great to have adult conversations. I think when you're too thin-skinned, you can't really delve into the meat and potatoes of a subject. So I just have a couple of questions, and I'll sit down. The engineering part of the river and proximity to the building, is there any danger there? I don't know all the terminologies, but will it have an impact on the structure? The other question I had was the management of the building is vital to the overall quality of life there. So I don't know if that's ever been addressed. And then the increased traffic, the safety, it's awfully hard to, even now, to get on Broadway to access and to get to work site and things like that. That's all I got.
Thank you, Bob. Skip, do you want to address that?
So DW Jones also has an arm called DW Jones Management that we would be the managers of this property. We manage about 3,500 units of both affordable and market rate housing in Minnesota, from about St. Cloud to all the borders. And they comprise about 111 different buildings. We have site offices in multiple areas of the state. We feel we do a good job. We do credit checks. We do rental background checks. You know, we try to do a good job to make sure we're bringing in good people into the building. Are we perfect? No. Do people's lives change and things happen, or do they have friends that cause problems? Yes. And when we have problems, we're not afraid to evict and move on. But we feel we do a good job. And we manage, we don't own all those properties. We manage for tribal nations. We manage for city HRAs. We manage for nonprofits. We manage for for-profits. And we manage our own properties that we own, which we do own about 50 buildings.
Thank you, Skip. All right, with that, okay.
Hi, Pam Ballard, Fergus Falls. I don't really have too much to say about the whole project thing and everything, but what I do want to say is I appreciate questions being asked by council members and by, you know, other people in the audience. Just because someone has an opinion that they think everything's great and no one should be opposed to it doesn't mean that, you know, the public shouldn't hear both sides and everything. And businesses too. I mean, I know maybe you have a special interest in this project going forward, but I don't think you should be looking down at others because they want an explanation. You know, I think questions going back and forth is good for everybody. Okay?
Thank you, Pam.
Mark Layton, Fergus Falls. Everyone has a great point of view. I'm going to look at this simply financially. Mr. Rachels, I hope that's not budget. I've talked to Skip. I've indicated to him that he's got a great company. They got a great program. Fergus Falls can't afford this.
Mark, would you speak up just a little bit, please?
Yeah, we're going to give $3 million away. We should have a new microphone. Let me address Ben first. At the state level, West Central Initiative, and Ben's hot button today is affordable housing. That's just the big deal. Ben also mentioned this property is going to produce $5,000 in real estate taxes. I'm guessing the present value of $5,000 a year, 26 years, is about $75,000. The present value of zero over the next 26 years is zero. I'm trying to figure out what's more, 75,000 or zero. Mr. Roofer, there's no impropriety going on here. I didn't request that. I simply addressed each council member as to what the cost to the taxpayers were. I'm not so sure anyone on the council knows. I did not get a response. I want to say that the city benefit to the developer, which is a cost to the taxpayer, is about $3.5 million. At the state level, another $4.5 million. This project is being funded by tax dollars to the tune of about $8 million. 70% of the project. In regards to population, employment, I too talk to a lot of business owners, and I do talk to a lot of business owners that are in different communities. They all have the same concerns. I don't have employees. There's probably 4 or 5 job openings for every worker in the United States, which is the reason we go and bring in other country workers, which is great. I don't believe if we build it, they'll come. I think there's 30, 40 homes for sale in Fergus. Unfortunately, I didn't get a hold of Herzog to find out how many occupancy apartments they have available. I don't think it's a matter of housing. I'm going to tip the coin over. It's a matter of not enough people. And I don't care if it's Fergus Falls, Alexandria, St. Cloud, Minneapolis. I don't care if it's, labor or doctors. The work session the city of TIF, the work session that the city held back in June of 20, the TIF conversation was the objective is to provide a minimum subsidy required to complete the project and a limit of 25 years. The current business subsidy program is limited by statute 116J993. One of those indicated that it's not for housing. Best test, we don't know that. If this land was purchased, cleaned up, there could very well be other investors who could easily come in here and say, oh, geez, I could do this. The benefit that the business subsidy policy was talking about was job creation. I'm not so sure there's going to be any job created here other than maybe a manager. Item J, increased tax base. Well, we're going to increase the tax base in Fergus Falls, but I don't think we're going to collect any real estate taxes. Uh, 116J994, increased tax base, job retention. I'm not so sure this is going to retain any jobs. I don't think Fergus Falls, in its current position, can afford this. Budget went up 8.5%. I'm guessing the operating losses, and I appreciate Bill's time. We try to discuss this a little bit, but he's very busy with the audit. I appreciate that. But I think under the new programs that you've got going, Aqua Center, D Lagoon, RTC, blah, 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 it's about $1.8 million loss. Now we're going to give $3.5 million away in a tax increment financing program. And you're going to turn around and institute a TIF, which will tax the people another $1.2 million a year. I haven't seen the detailed operating costs. I can't believe that this thing won't fund itself. You're coming in with nearly 70% tax benefits on $1.2 million or a $12 million project. I don't know how. I don't have a detailed listing of the operating costs, which indicated it was like 42%. I believe this thing should fund itself. I'm not so sure the owners are putting any equity in. I'm not so. I'm impressed with their bank. Again, it's a great project. I don't think it's going to bring anybody here. At the last audit, the only employment increase that we had was government jobs. It wasn't industry jobs. It'll be interesting to see what the next audit brings us. So, with the current financial situation that the city has, the increased budget, the operating losses on some programs that are being involved, to give away $3.5 million over the next 26 years is hard for me to swallow on a financial basis. I strongly believe that this council should strongly consider purchasing the ground and sitting on it. Let this thing cool off. This is the second worst economy I've ever lived through in my life. Number one, buy the land, clean it up, Number two, see what happens.
Thanks, Mr.
My
Layton.
time is obviously run out. Thank
Yeah,
you.
Thank you, Mr. Layton. I just, we're going to move along. We're going to close the public hearing at this point. We do have one council member who has to leave in a few minutes. Since you did bring up some comments that I made, I just want to clarify, and I did offer to go over this with you in person so that you understood this document. Clearly, I think there's some things that you're not understanding that I said. There's $5,116 that are currently taxed. That's the taxable taxes collected on that property. Correct, staff, correct me if I'm wrong, or Kayla, correct me if I'm wrong. That will continue to be collected over the life of the TIF. So it's not a zero, it's $5,116 is the estimated. That will continue to be collected. We are capturing any increase in that tax based on the construction on this site. That's what we are using to finance the upfront investment of 1.2 into this project over the course of 26 years. So it's not an additional $1.2 million tax burden on the taxpayers. It's not a zero tax that we're collecting on the site. And the third point was, I don't even remember. There was one other one that was, anyway, we're going to, I would like, at this point, we'll vote this up or down. I'd look for a resolution to
I'll offer the resolution.
create a TIF district. We have a resolution from Mr. Fish, from Mr. Roofer. We've talked, last comments?
Yeah, I had just a quick comment when we were talking about the rent possibly being higher at a new building. Obviously, a new building is going to have higher rents than existing buildings, but what this new building might do is people might move into this new building from existing buildings, which would open up spots for open up spots with lower rents. So it's not like we're going to expect every worker to all of a sudden pay higher rents. It's that the market will do what the market does. People will maybe move into the nicer new building, opening up spots for people with that can afford less rent. So just wanted to make that comment when that was brought up.
One interesting point too, and this is the third point I was going to make, and then I'll be done, hopefully. But if you look at the estimated generation of taxes at the end of the first year, at the end of the tax estimated, it's 30 times what we're currently collecting right now. That's what this investment in the development, in addition to the 60 units of housing for our employers. So significantly, that's the purpose of TIF. Brent?
I just got one quick statement when it comes to needing and availability. My wife's a leasing agent in this town, works for a company that has numerous buildings, and their apartments are rented before the current people in there are gone. And then there's a waiting list for people to get in. I mean, so there is a need, and I mean, she has them rented before the current tenants are even out.
Thanks, Brent. And we've had good conversations. I'm going to call for the question if it's all right. We've had discussion. There's a resolution approving or establishing a TIF financing district, 801 West Stanton. Roll call, please.
No.
Yes.
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 No.
Yes.
Yes.
That resolution is approved. Next, we would need a resolution accepting a letter of intent from River's Edge LLC, an affiliate of D.W. Jones, to acquire the property at 801 West End Avenue for the development of a workforce housing project. If someone would like to offer. Thank you, Scott.
I'll second.
Thank you, Jim. Roll call.
No.
Yes.
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 No.
Yes.
Yes.
The resolution is approved. Finally, we would entertain a resolution authorizing the City of Fergus Falls to act as legal sponsor for the River's Edge Workforce Housing Project application to the Minnesota Housing Finance Authority. I would look for that resolution as well.
Offer.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Scott. Roll call, please.
No.
Yes.
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 No.
Yes.
Yes.
That resolution is approved. Thanks, everyone. If there's nothing else to come before the council, we're adjourned.